Life happens, and not always the way we expect it to. Every single day we face change, stress, and uncertainty. What if you could learn to thrive no matter what life throws your way? Resilience expert Adam Markell and his inspiring guests explore breakthrough strategies to fully embrace change and build the resilience required to become change-proof.
As the executive director of Superpower Experts and creator of the Superpower Network, the #1 podcast network for inspired personal development, Tonya Dawn Recla spends her days proving superpowers are real. She's passionate about creating scalable, sustainable solutions to support rapid evolution and vibrational shifts for individuals and the collective. In today's replay episode, we discussed her commitment to authenticity, personal responsibility, and accountability. Our world will be a peaceful place when people start working on their inner peace, she says. Tony's advice for people wanting to take the first step into taking personal responsibility and operating from their highest frequency is one of the things that we spent a great deal of time discussing and ideating together. Enjoy. Hey everybody, it's Adam, and I am really jazzed up, as I am almost every moment of every day. I got to kind of contain my energy. And my wife, Randy, she always reminds me to harness my energy. So it's, again, that goddess wisdom that's been so such a huge benefit to me. And I'm ecstatic because I have another amazing goddess with great wisdom and great experience in business and personal transformation that I get to share with all of you. And her name is Tonya Dawn, and she's got an amazing company called Superpower Experts. And Tonya, would you, I said to you right before we started that I'm not big on the whole introduction thing, where we read off the list of all the accomplishments that you've had. I'd prefer it if you would share with us just one or two nuggets that, that you really want people to know about you as a human being, in addition to the fact that you run a company and you're an entrepreneur and you're hugely successful and you mentor and coach people, and you've done that all over the world, and you've made a huge difference, and that's truly special. But I want our folks to know, who you are, not the who are you kind of thing, but really just what you want them to know about you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. I always love a moment to connect with you. And so I'm excited about what transpires between us always when we commit to that space. The biggest piece is exactly that. This is what I do these days 24/7 is that connection. I tell people I have like hundreds of birthing projects all over the world right now. But I operate in a concept called synergistic collaboration, and it's committing to the love and the energy that exists between us. And it's kind of, a lot of people would say it's maybe a little bit ironic given the fact that I come from, I'm an Army veteran, counterintelligence, the whole spy world stuff. It's like, what is she doing talking about love and consciousness and all kinds of good stuff? But that's the path, right? Most of us who are doing this kind of work have some sort of a story that's rooted in real practicality and linearity and more traditionalism, and I'm no exception to that. So that's that we could go through the gamut, but ultimately the most important piece is that my work in the world is being that bridge. And so bringing everyone into the conversation, whether it's, the way woo-woo, metaphysical kind of energy realms or the practical business, entrepreneurship, there's real change and shift happening. And the only way that happens is through that continued integration. And I'm the embodiment of that.
Yeah. It's, wow. Embodiment. Yeah. It's, to me, I know my own story, so my our tribe knows it. I'm not going to bore anybody with it. It's a story about change, about how do you utilize change, and which is everywhere around us, so that change doesn't become something we fear and react to, but something that we embrace and that we respond to. And that to me is an embodiment practice. So when you said embodiment, that's what just came up for me. And you, I think, are one of those people that really does embody it. Like I meet a lot of great people for sure. And there are people who are really great at acting. I'm going to say, they who they present themselves as is sometimes pretty great.
Mm-hmm.
I don't always buy or think that they're exactly that way in their, in other contexts, let's say. But I got this real deep feeling of authenticity from you, that you are at the core just exactly who you appear to be. And whether people like it, don't get it, don't get it, not really your concern. I'd call it, call that being able to stand in your power. But more than being, you're obviously committed to power. It's part of what you do as a company. So maybe we could speak to that for sure. But the word authenticity is what comes up for me. So thank you for that. And I'd love to know whether that's been the case for you all of your life, or whether that's been a pivot along the way that you've learned and been able to transition into that embodiment of a more powerful and true beingness.
Great question. Thank you so much. That I love that. Well, that's why you and I connect, because we can see that and honor that in each other. And I think those of us who do this work, we just get to a place where it's like, that's it. Like I don't, what's the phrase, suffer fools lightly, it's like, I just don't have a lot of patience for, those who are unwilling to traverse the uncomfortable spaces. And I have ultimate and absolute patience for those who are willing to, even if they're not well versed at it. The willingness to me is what tugs at my heart and keeps me going. It's the unwillingness to move into those spaces, because they kind of suck sometimes. They're deep and they're rooted and they're kind of gushy and not all that great, but there's secrets and magic in those spaces. But to answer your question, it's yes to both. Like I really, the authenticity has been a constant unfoldment process, but the commitment to that journey has always been there. And it's taken many different faces. Well, I guess I should say faces, layers, as the onion kind of concept, as we peel back the layers, it looks different. But the root of it was that commitment to my own evolution above all else, and to the detriment of everything else. And I brought that into our marriage. I brought that into motherhood. I brought that into all of it. And it's kind of a kick in the pants when it's like, I can't just be a wife to my husband or a mother to my daughter. But what we can do is, as two solid, holistic, whole beings, and three whole beings kind of walk beside each other. And that creates a whole different dialogue than the idea that we are, that somehow we're obligated to engage in societal roles, or to honor or entertain lower frequency spaces in people. And I think that's ultimately what you're seeing, that you're picking up on, is that we think it's compassion and we think that it's sincerity when we meet people in their misery, or when we meet them in a lower frequency space. But it takes real courage to say, I'm not going to honor that in you. That's not truth. And what I am going to honor is where we connect in a space where we're all connected, where love is the frequency, love is what kind of binds us together. I'm going to honor that above all else. And that may mean that it doesn't sound real pretty in the moment. And that may mean that I'm not your favorite person in that second. But I have a lot of support and strength and a whole community and God behind me to say there's something bigger, and I'm going to hold that vision for you until you can see it yourself.
Yeah, I'm processing that distinction right now, because that's pretty profound. We talk a lot about meeting people where they are, and typically when I think of that, I think that's a good thing, and not good or bad, but just that makes sense, to meet people where they are, and then but then the layer below that is, do you end up staying with them where they are? Is that your intention, to meet them where they are? And obviously I know our intention is to meet with them and then to help them to elevate themselves. Right. But what I also heard you say is that, it's not necessarily the case that you want to tolerate, or that you'll spend a lot of your time necessarily in the space of someone else in their misery, if they're not willing to see right, or try or attempt to move beyond that.
Yeah, I actually flip the process. So I do it opposite. So instead of meeting them where they're at and trying to raise them, it's really, really challenging, because energy seeks to balance itself. And so it's much easier for you to get pulled down into a frequency you're already familiar with than to pull somebody up into a frequency that perhaps they haven't embodied yet. They exist there, but they may not be consciously aware of it. So I just flip it. And so I meet them in that higher echelon space and affirm that for them. And then what I find is that the language that they can connect with just naturally comes through. It's their language, it's their information. So trusting that connection where we exist up there to guide the process, as opposed to allowing my mind to come in and say, well, I know where you're sitting here, because ultimately all that is it's representing an aspect of myself in a lower frequency place. And so all it's doing is encouraging that for both of us. Whereas if you can affirm that higher space, really, I mean, I think if we're honest, and I don't even know if we should be saying this out loud, but we all do this work because it's the next phase of our own evolution. And so to pretend that I can look at somebody and say, oh, you're here, and I'm going to meet you there and talk to you there, all I'm doing is coddling a lower frequency aspect of myself. And we just stay there together. And it's like, you exist there, so you can go down there. And that's why it feels so real to people. They're like, yeah, but it feels real. And I was like, of course it feels real, but does it feel good? This is also real, but there just aren't that many places and people that affirm that existence for us. And I think that that's important work to do as well.
So how does that, this is wonderful. And I'd love to know where either that shows up in your work. So if you could tell us a little bit about the work that you do and how that's incorporated into that process, that would be, I feel like that's a good place to go from here.
Absolutely. I connect with people in what I call the abstract frequency. So all that yummy gooiness that we were talking about. And I typically stay there. I mean, I get knocked down from time to time, but my goal is to stay in that solidity. So you brought up power before. My whole journey started about 10 years ago when I wrote the book War, the Ultimate Guide to Personal Power and Safety. And that was my understanding of it at the time. And so I talked about situational awareness, of course, coming from the Army and counter intel and stuff like that. It was a natural positioning for me to start combining self-awareness and spiritual awareness into situational awareness. That was a big component that I felt was missing in a lot of those dialogues. And so when I added that in, and, like you said, you've got your stories, I've got mine, and that's what led me to some of the realizations. And over time, what that led me to was, instead of the conversation around personal power, it led me into what I named kind of individual resonance. And so really owning the energy and owning your energy signature. Most people are broadcasting their insecurities all the time, and they have no idea that they're doing it.
Right.
And so their words are saying one thing, but their energy is just like broadcasting. We used to teach this at counter intel agents. If you can pick up on the energy signatures, you know how to get people to do what you want them to do. That's the point. I mean, that's kind of the name of that game. I kind of came out of that and chose to use my powers in a little bit of a different fashion. But that's what led me into the whole kind of superpower dialogue, which in my opinion is full autonomy. Ultimately, that's all any of us can really aim for, is our own mastering that personal power, developing our own autonomy. And in that space, now we can move into what I call using your superpowers, which is where we choose to use them for good. We commit to using them for good, and we choose to do that with other people. And you can't really collaborate until you have that autonomy, because if you move into collaboration prematurely, you're constantly defining yourself through the collaboration, as opposed to coming in with a solidity of self, allowing the collaboration to continue to mold you and shape you, just like a marriage does or any other relationship. But you have to know where your center is, or else the next thing you know that creates competition and ego and fear and all of that good stuff. And we need some solid collaborations to resolve some of the challenges, I'm not a real doomsdayer, but the idea that we all know ultimately that we can do this better. And that's going to require us all coming together and working together. Well, there's work that has to be done prior to even that point. It's Pollyanna-ish to think that we're all going to come together and join hands and come up with solutions. Not if people haven't done the work on themselves to kind of figure out what piece they even hold for the puzzle.
Yeah, I think this is one of the central, like there's a central line where you and I believe are connected. From my perspective, it's that idea that it's about personal responsibility and personal accountability, and to ourselves, of course, because wanting more for the world, wanting the world to be a better place. Like for us, we really love peace. Like that's what we want, is people to have their peace and to have peace in our greater community. But it's not about politics or about politicians or about governments or any of those things that are really abstract for most people. I think it's really about us individually working on our piece. So doing what you said, doing the work ourselves to actualize the highest and best versions that we can be, creates peace in us, and then ultimately is the offering that we make to everybody that we interact with, right? Like, as you said, your energy is there, ahead of you, probably ahead of your words. It's ahead of your thoughts. It's that energy that's either sort of, taking or giving. It's, as I've heard it said, affecting or infecting. I mean, it's that kind of thing. And so to own that, to be responsible for our own energy, to be powerful in that regard, that we're managing that for ourselves, for our highest good, becomes the highest good of everybody around us. And that's, so I sometimes say that we'd have world peace if just enough people, or not if, but when enough people are selfishly, like with a capital S, selfishly working on their own personal inner peace, our world will be peaceful. It hits a tipping point where there's just more of that energy than there is the energy of people, doing other things, right?
Well, and it goes so far beyond that, which is really where the superpower kind of dialogue came in. And I love everything that you're saying. The challenge is that in order to see it from that perspective, you really have to start entertaining the idea that perhaps things aren't as we thought they were. And so the willingness to kind of play with concepts like the matrix and energetic kind of woo-woo-iness and some multidimensional kind of concepts, because what happens is when you go down those trajectories and you start playing a little bit, you recognize that the world really is a projection of what's happening internally for you. You deny it internally, and it has to show up in your external environment to get your attention. And that's the process. And so the idea that we can go out and change the world, but not really pay attention to the self, is quite erroneous. And it is selfish. It's the most selfish thing in the world. However, it ends up on the flip side of that being the most selfless thing in the world. The idea that be the change you want to see in the world, those weren't just pretty words. You can't affect your external environment unless you're willing to look internally first and manage it. We teach this stuff all the time. And the biggest problem I see is most people lack the discipline or the willingness to counter themselves in every single moment and say, okay, what frequency am I operating from? And I don't mean high energy versus low energy. You don't need to be bouncing off the walls and putting on a big show. But when you start to attune yourself to frequencies, and that's where that individual resonance really comes into play, you can take responsibility in every moment for what you're creating in the next. And it becomes a practice. And then you exude that, and then you model that, and then you impact others with it. And then you look at situations and you can see solutions in a very different way because you're not operating from fear first. But it is a practice.
So why don't we take a couple of minutes if you're game for this, and just lead us into what that awareness practice is. So somebody says, okay, so if I'm responsible for my energy, I've heard that before. Mm-hmm. Again, I love the way you pointed out. It's not just rah-rah energy versus quiet, and that's, it's something deeper than that superficial view, let's say, of energy. What is that energy at its core, and how can people that are tuning into this right now actually tune in? How about this? The people tuning into this can tune into their own frequency. How would you recommend they do that?
You're an entrepreneur through and through. You're like, how can I spin that? Let's go. I love
that. Was the lawyer. That's the lawyer.
That's perfect. The concept is that you can, it looks different in different levels. So I'm not shirking that question, but I really want to affirm for people that it always looks different at different frequencies. And so we start people off in the whole, like, you're not your mind, you're not your mode, just really simple, like managing your thoughts, managing what emotions you're exuding, like really paying attention to why those are coming up, where those triggers are happening. We work a lot with triggers, whether it be cognitive, emotional, or vibrational triggers, and helping to identify what's happening, like what is going, just taking a step back and going, whoa, like rather than just pushing forward from programmed behaviors and patterns, wait, what is going on? Like question everything initially, just go like, okay, why am I acting this way? Like, why am I really upset? We work with our daughter, she's 7 now, but we work with her a lot on, it used to be, she'd move quickly into anger. And so keeping it at sadness, like where was their first emotion, and at that stage a couple of years ago, it was that sadness. So really training her to stay sad. Like we don't want to stay sad because it feels vulnerable, but stay sad for half a second and ask, what is it that you're really seeking? Well, once she got really good at that, then we had to move her into a new process. Once you've mastered a process, you have to be willing to develop a new one. And so we moved her into the space of really looking even beyond the emotion and what is it that you're truly, truly seeking. And we've got her now to where she can recognize and she goes, I feel like I just need some connection. Awesome. Let's connect. Let's start there and make sure you're operating from a solid foundation before you take action. And sometimes you have to take a step back and go, wow, I feel really adrift. Like I feel alone. I feel unloved. I feel unsupported and unprotected. Why do I feel afraid right now? What is the fear? And so, we use time out a little bit differently in our family, and it's just time out. Go find the fear. Go figure out what is underneath all of this. And let's address the fear. Let's talk about what's real. And she's learned that, I'll stop everything that I'm doing and talk for hours about what's real, but not the stories and not the overlays and not the dramas around what we don't want to take a look at. And those are just really simple techniques that you can start with. And the bigger piece is allowing yourself to recognize that you have all these different pieces and parts inside of you. That's where people get tripped up. They're like, yeah, but it feels real. I feel sad. It's like, of course you do. An aspect of you feels sad, but where you connect at your highest isn't sad. Like you're phenomenal. You're beautiful. You're this amazing, infinite, multidimensional being. Which aspect of you do you want to connect with? And it's not shirking the emotions and hiding them and ignoring them. It's moving to that observer role and saying, wow, what is going on here? What is the fear? Getting a bit of perspective on things, I think is key. I moved away from the whole ego dialogue a long time ago because I felt like it didn't give me credit for the work I'd already done. It was like, well, I just worked through this ego issue, and then here's my ego again. It's like, holy cow, this thing won't go away. So I just started breaking it all up into pieces and parts. And then I get credit for a part that I've loved and integrated. But then there's another part. It's not the same part. I didn't do it wrong. I didn't have to go back and learn that lesson. I'm just learning it in a different way at a different level. And it just motivated me to keep going on that process. And so there are different techniques that you can use. And then ultimately the guidance is to stay in that highest frequency. And that's where that knowledge of your own internal resonance really comes into play. The reason why that's so crucial is energetic manipulation. And we're either manipulating an environment or being manipulated by it in every moment. So you choose, and we don't like to talk about things like manipulation. It feels icky and we don't like to think about it, but you are being manipulated in every single scenario and you are manipulating others. Own that, recognize it, and make a choice about how you're going to manipulate the environment. But we're seeing energetic manipulation being used. It's like NLP on crack. It's a powerful tool, but when people are wielding it without that solid sense of self and that solid embodiment of those higher frequencies, it can get ugly pretty fast. And it wreaks more havoc, of course, on the individual's personal life, as we know, than on anything that they can do to others. But there's typically some collateral damage along the way. Yeah. So really just asking people to be responsible for that.
Hey, so what's come up for me as I'm listening to you, I thought somebody who's participating is actively listening to what we're saying right now might say, well, great, you go find the fear. When you said, well, there's ways to begin, I wrote down a few. One was this question that your daughter uses that you've given her, which is what is it you're really seeking? I think it's a very powerful question, and I'm a huge believer that asking powerful questions is a very significant way to up-level your life, even when you don't have answers, especially when you don't have answers. Because to me, the most powerful questions are actually the ones you don't have answers to, but you ask them knowing and believing and having faith at some level in the universal law, which to me is that questions and answers have a cause and effect relationship. So you cannot ask a question that you will not get an answer to. You will always get an answer. You just might not get it in the time frame that you want it. So you might want it now, but you're not going to get it now. It's just like, having somebody's name that you can't think of. It's in your head. It's on the tip of your tongue. You can't remember it, but then you let it go. And an hour later, you're washing the dishes or something, and the name pops in your head. Yeah. Kind of that type of thing. So, what is it that you're really seeking? I hope, folks are writing that question down right now. And then you also said, go find the fear. So when you go after the fear, I mean, you're seeking to find what it is that you're actually fearful of. What's the step at that moment? That seems to me like that's a pivotal moment right there. So for you, when you go inward and allow yourself to feel what you're feeling and not try to, shoo it away or distract it or get busy to create drama so that you don't thinking about that anymore, but you actually sit with it, and you go find it, and you find it. That's an interesting moment. It's like going to look for a tiger and you find the tiger. So tell us what that's like for you.
I sit with it. I sit with it until it doesn't have that constrictive feeling anymore. I love it. Part of it is the belief that we carry a light within us that can overcome any fear. So the first step, of course, is recognizing that it's all fear. If it's not love, it's fear. Like if it's not expansive and light, it's constricting, and there's some element of fear. But there's a profound belief. I love that you brought up this tiger image. It actually reminded me biblically, ironically, about like Daniel in the lion's den,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
You have to have an unwavering confidence that you have a light and it's connected to something so much greater than yourself and so much bigger than yourself, that no matter what the fear is, if you just have your little itty bitty flame walking into it, it will change it. It does start to dissipate the fear, and that fear will hide from the light, right? We know this. You can't chase it around, but you've got to just be in it. Like it's gross and it sucks and it feels oppressive and it hurts and you want to cry and you do all of that, but you stay in it. And you start doing that in our conversations. You don't run away from them. You don't try to overlay them. Like I'm noticing this in marriages, in parenting, all of it. You stay in it energetically. And you just know that as long as you lead with love, and that's out front and center, it changes everything. Always. It can't help but. Yeah. And it's just that confidence. It doesn't mean that you're going to have the answer right away. I love what you said about, kind of keeping that question loop open. Don't let the mind or the fear try to close it off. Keep it open and just say, I don't know what's going to happen here, but I know ultimately I'm safe. And sometimes you have to play little mind games with yourself to where it's like, okay, am I safe right now in this moment? And it may just be in this millisecond. Am I okay? Well, yeah, but you might not be okay in 2 seconds. Okay. But in this millisecond, am I okay? Right. And then the next one, and then the next one. And sometimes that's all you can do is just in every moment. And you just got to manage all of those pieces and parts. I call it like kind of sitting on your throne, that sovereign. And as long as that sovereign is sitting on his or her throne, all those other parts will submit. They will calm down. They will submit. But if they're wreaking havoc, it means that sovereign, the king or queen, is not sitting on the throne. Get back on the throne. Listen to what they're saying. Like, you're not going to just dismiss your subjects because they're fearful of the dragon that's coming to eat them, right? You go, okay, what's the concern? What do we need to talk about today? I mean, I hold full-on board meetings every morning when I wake up. Okay, how's everybody doing? All my pieces and parts. Where are we at? And just let them have a voice, because when you do that, it starts to demystify that process. But when you try to shut them down or hold them up or whatever you're doing, or ignoring them or pretending they're not there, they just get louder. And they force that projection then in your environment. You're going to take notice one way or the other. I'd rather do it willingly.
Yeah. And I love that image. So I really appreciate the visual of the sovereign, and that sovereign being your higher self, your true knowledge, knowledge of your true being, which is love.
One connection too.
Spirit connection. Exactly. Yeah. It's a profound learning for sure that in a moment you can check in with yourself by asking a question, like, is the sovereign on the throne, right? For example, who's driving the bus here?
Yep, exactly.
And more often than not, if people are being honest, and I'd say this about myself too, more often it's fear driving the bus. I mean, that's just
absolutely.
Yeah. And so to be present to that gives you other options, other choices. In fact, what you were saying earlier about frequencies, it occurred to me that reacting and responding, like because I want people to sort of tangibly feel out what frequencies look like when we're talking about energy. when for the most part, I think we talk about it as high energy and low energy.
Right.
And what you're giving us is some just gray matter on there's more there than just, how we even physically perceive energy. Reacting and responding, these are different energies, right?
Absolutely. Well, and I really want to affirm for your listeners too, because over the last 18 months, you and I tend to attract a lot of the same kind of, not that same people, but a lot of the movers and shakers, the people who were really here to have an impact on the world. And over the last 18 months on our podcast over at the Superpower Experts, I've talked with a number of those individuals. And I will tell you, most of them are sitting in a place of fear right about now because they don't know what's next, right? They kind of climb their own mountain in my speak, and then they're sitting there going, what's next? And this really ties into your pivot concept. And it's the willingness to continue to say, wait, what if the next thing looks different than what we thought it was going to? And what I really want to affirm is that as we go through this process, that attunement process gets more and more and more subtle. And I contend that you reach a point where you cannot see those fear pieces on your own. You can't. There's too subtle. I mean, we needed help moving the big boulders and the rocks, and then we needed help moving the pebbles. Why would we think that we wouldn't need help moving the grains of sand and the dust that remains at these higher frequencies? You have to find people who are sitting in a vibration that's either right where you're going or similar to yours to get assistance in seeing that. And what I'm seeing over and over and over again is that people are confusing material success with this next layer of growth. And so they're seeking advice from people who are just as afraid and just as confused as they are. And it's all the folks who are sitting on mountains of money and have all whatever's going on, and they're not admitting that money's going away. Those relationships are going away. Those businesses are failing because they don't know what comes next. And if you're in that situation, please stop telling people to do exactly what you're doing because it's not working. Sit back and go, okay, what needs to change here? And be willing to face it courageously and say, I built this whole brand around this concept. You growing doesn't mean that your brand is no longer effective. It means it's no longer effective for you. We build up brands and businesses so that we can move on. You build a convergence around an idea that is still helpful to people at certain frequencies. Now move into the next one because there are people looking for you. I talk to them all the time. And we need more and more people being willing to pull the veil back and go, I think there's something that comes next. We all kind of broke out of the matrix and no one said, oh, by the way, you just built a new construct. Well, wouldn't it make sense at some point we have to break out of that one and go into the next one?
Yes. What's now and what's next? It's interesting because in 1955, they started tracking the 500 most successful companies, and they call it the Fortune 500. They still do. It still tracks the 500 most successful companies that are publicly traded. And that index, it's interesting. When you look at the companies that were on the original index, only 12%, it's actually less than 12% of those companies exist today. So these were the companies that you would have, thought would be around forever. And yet they're not, because they weren't thinking about what's next. They weren't working on the business that they would be in over time by looking ahead at where they would need to be different or provide something that was different and where the world would be different. They were just, in essence, protecting what they had, protecting the status quo on some level, playing more defense than anything else. And I think that's really important because I think people, at the root of why we do what we do in regard to pivot is to help people to break out of that, the trying to keep safe, to play it. So
Like, what does that even mean anymore?
I don't exactly. But yet it's still an existing paradigm.
It is
all based in fear, right?
Yeah, I just got done telling our whole group, I was like, here's the deal. If you're waiting for the chaos to slow down, you're going to be really disappointed. You have to be able to walk in the middle of the storm. Like you have to. The only hope that you have is to find resonance and to find some sort of stability within yourself so that you can walk in the storm. But that's the work. It's easy to do our work at the top of our mountain and wait for people to come to us. And you can help onesies and twosies. But most of us have gotten visions and information and guidance that there's more to do. Well, the only way you do that is you have to walk back down off the mountain and go back into the world that you just pulled yourself out of. How can you do that if you don't have the tools to maintain your own frequency and solidity as you're doing the work in the place that it really needs to be done?
Yeah.
That's a whole different process than climbing up your mountain.
It is, and it's the perfect place to take the last segment of our show, which is really regarding the practices, the personal. I call them rituals. Some people feel like there's religious tones with that. To me, it's not. I refer to that as master habits. So, like Covey had his 7 habits. These are, to me, what are the master habits? The ones that you consciously create to use your words, to maintain your resonance, to maintain your solidity, knowing that you're walking into a storm, or that a storm is about to start, or you're coming out of a storm. But either way, that you really are grounded and centered. So could you share at least maybe one ritual, something that you do that keeps you in that solidified state?
I stay connected to my lifelines. That's what I call them. I find the people who are amazing at what they do. I know exactly what they're amazing at and where they play really, really well, what puzzle piece they hold. And I use them in that regard. And I keep them close. I mean, I often have like 5-minute conversations with somebody, be like, hey, I just need to da-da-da-da-da. And sometimes they don't have to say a word. There is magic in the space between us. When we're willing to come together and connect with people in these higher frequencies, magic always happens right between us. And sometimes it's just meeting together in love and saying, I hear you. And like, well, have you considered this? And sometimes it's just a little itty, like a 1-sentence thing. And I'm like, oh, yep, that's what I needed. Awesome. Thank you. And we're off and running again. Those of us who do this work, we're busy. We have stuff to do. There's real work to be done in the world. You have to know who's in that space with you. Find your allies, look to your left, look to your right. And again, don't look for the money, folks. There's a whole group of people who didn't use money as a catalyst in this lifetime, and they achieved material success without achieving that vibrational resonance that is going to be necessary moving forward. And so be really cautious who you hand over that sort of authority to. Ultimately, you want the people who are going to help you build up your own individual authority. And support. I mean, that's what Superpower Experts is all about. We have a whole network of people so that people can find their allies and get the support they need so they can do this work in the world.
Yeah. So what I heard you say, I think, was that you stay close to what you called your lifelines, which are other people that support you or that you feel supported from.
Absolutely. And who operate in a resonance and a frequency that is in alignment with where I'm at or where I'm going.
Right. So again, you're not kind of entrusting your energy or infecting your energy, let's say, with some folks, especially if you're in a vulnerable place that you get with somebody. So the way that Chelsea, our oldest daughter, and I actually think of this is we talk about chunking up or chunking down. So, when you chunk down, you get into that muddy place with people that in survival mode or scarcity mode, and they're drowning. And I was a lifeguard for a lot of years, and the first instinct of a drowning person, believe it or not, is to drown someone else.
Yep, absolutely.
That's truly crazy about it.
But we love to eat our own, right?
Oh my God, yeah, exactly. But when we love to eat our own, that's so funny. But when you chunk up, right, when you're in that space with people that are wanting to raise their energy and are in fact raising their energy, raising that vibration for themselves. Oh, my son is waving to me.
Hello, son.
Hey, Max, you want to stick your head in here? So we're on a podcast, but just stick your head in. And this is Tonya Dawn. Tonya, I'm Max.
Hey, nice to meet you.
Meet you. Yeah.
Very cool. I love the family endeavors.
Yeah. Yeah, brother. See you later. I love you too. Yeah, it's amazing when we hang around with people that have a good energy, that your energy is just there. It matches up or it matches down, I guess is the concept, right? So it doesn't mean that you're not don't have compassion. I have compassion for people who are in a bad place and all that, but it's what you said earlier. It's kind of bringing this full circle that my job isn't necessarily to get in the muddy place with them, because it's very difficult to help. If you want to truly be of help, it's tough to help when you're, in the quicksand with them.
Absolutely.
Much better to be, handing them a stick or a rope or doing whatever you can do to help them to, pull themselves out, or you help them to get out of there. Just recognizing too, as a part of just how we're built as human beings, that oftentimes, and I wouldn't have known this if I hadn't been a lifeguard, that their instinct for survival reasons is to just take their arms and wrap them around you and hold on for dear life while you both drown.
Absolutely. That's a great analogy. And it's not out of ego. I mean, or it's not out of any malice. It's out of fear. That it's just an instinct that we have that says, help me get some solid footing in this space. And ironically, the best thing you can do is to not get in that space with them. Certainly assist or take in enough resources with you when you go. If you have to go in there and get them, make sure you've got your rope or you've got your lifesaver, whatever tools you utilize. But if you go in unarmed and you go in not filled and not fueled or at a lower frequency, you're right. You're both going under.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to say thank you because you really. I used some analogies from that experience. I spent 7 years as an ocean lifeguard, but I have not used this one before. Meaning, I didn't see that aspect of it. Not just from the standpoint of don't get sort of get in a situation where you're going to get drowned by somebody else, but more or less the idea that you come in resourced. And I did. Like, we would work up an hour in the stand and down an hour, up an hour, down an hour, because the hours we were in the stand, often we were constantly making saves because it was a very busy ocean beach, thousands and thousands of people, riptides and rough water and all that kind of thing. So on the down hours, we would run, we would swim, we would lift weights in the shack, we would eat our lunch. We were taking care of ourselves physically. We were in camaraderie, and we had a great team, great crew. So when it was rough out there, we wouldn't go in alone. We'd go in, we have our lives, have the buoy, the lifesaver, you'd have your fins on sometimes, you'd have your other mates that were going to swim out, and so there's 3 or 4 of us out there. Sometimes we'd have the dory out there, the boat that was out there, whatever we needed, the paddleboard, the surfboard. We had equipment to make sure that we could do that job, which was to save lives and help people and not lose life, not lose those folks' lives, not lose our lives. And that's a process.
Absolutely. And you have to be willing to, the climb up the mountain is very individual. I affirm that. Absolutely. It is a solo journey. The climb back down that mountain is a collaborative venture. You have to be willing to come together, grow transparently in the presence of others, be vulnerable, be transparent, and really kind of uplift everybody as you go. But the more of us who do that, we're exponentially more powerful together. 2 + 2 = 1,000. It's not a 1-in-1. But exponentially more impactful when we choose to come together. But when we bring our own strength into it and our willingness to see ourselves and to not hide from that and not to put on airs or to put on masks and all this other crap that we do, it's like you're broadcasting the insecurities anyway, folks. Stop. You're never the most intuitive person in a room anymore. Trust me. Somebody knows if you're not comfortable or confident in what you're saying. Be honest.
So we're wrapping up here. I'd love for you to share, where is it that our community can find more information about you and the work that you do?
Absolutely. Superpowerexperts.com. Pretty easy. There's a little quiz on the homepage. You can find out one of your superpowers. But mostly if you're listening to this, like, our people always know who they are. If you hear a yes, then come join us, and just know that, I say it's like an energetic Verizon network. If you know you're here to do impactful work in the world, you have to be supported. And that's the work that we do in the world.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being
thank you.
Special light in our presence today. Thank you for that.
Thank you for the invitation. It's always a pleasure. And I honor you for everything that you do in the world. Thank you.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We hope you now have even more tools and greater insights to build resilience and become change-proof. Help us inspire others by sharing this episode and leaving your comments over at adammarkell.com/podcast. For more resilience tips and strategies, including support for building change-proof teams, visit adammarkell.com/become change-proof.